Episode 116 of the TwinSpires Racing Roundtable is underway. Nick Tammaro here. We've got a pretty terrific weekend of racing to look back on, and joining me to do so is Emily Gullikson. Emily, it's Oaklawn season, so obviously I know you're very excited about that. We'll talk a little Oaklawn in addition to a few others. How are you?
I'm doing well. Yes, I am very excited about Oaklawn. Opening week was great. As horse players, I think it's underrated when you get just a fair racing surface, and that's what we had opening week, and looks like good weather. So it's been really good, very formful, good races, very competitive, and yeah, I'm enjoying opening week and just hoping it lasts all the way through May.
Exactly right. I actually watched all the replays this morning from the entire week. And every time I wanted to think the track might be going a certain direction, the next result was one that made it clear it was very, very fair. And even with some really varying weather conditions, too, because it was 65 degrees on Friday and about 30 degrees colder than that when racing started on Sunday, as you alluded to, always dealing with dirt racing. A limited number of distances, always good for handicappers as well in many ways, but a fair surface, absolutely what puts it over the top for sure. And we've seen some great support from the wagering public for Oaklawn thus far and expect it to continue that way. We're actually going to start, Emily, at Los Alamitos with the Los Alamitos Futurity, which was another stepping stone for 2-year-olds leading in to their 3-year-old season. And it was won, unsurprisingly, by Bob Baffert, who has collected a number of victories in the Los Alamitos Futurity, this time with Litmus Test, who was coming back out of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, where he actually ran quite well, all things considered. But this was a real step forward for Litmus Test, and a litmus test a bit, if you will, in terms of where he fits with maybe grade 2 types. What did you make of this effort all in all? And are we buying that big speed figure, a 99, excuse me, a 90 Brisnet speed rating, but a 96 Beyer speed figure for Litmus Test?
Yeah, it's an interesting race. And as you mentioned, Bob Baffert brought in three horses. And in terms of Litmus Test's performance that day, it was a smart ride and really a perfect trip, all things considered, start to finish. I think when you start to zoom out and then look at who Litmus Test was coming into the race and put that in the context of some of the other horses in the race. There were two other maidens. They had two stablemates, one of those being the maiden that finished second in Blacksmith, who I thought ran well, all things considered, picking up some black type in that effort. Another horse that had an excuse and Captivator, things like that to just kind of consider going forward. And Litmus Test just really stood out just in terms of their speed figures. Having that class edge had already been tested in grade 1 company. So it was the type of race that was, like you said, moved him forward and good confidence builder. But you would like to see him going forward and getting a class test. And as we talk about Oaklawn, Bob Baffert has sent horses there, and maybe they're thinking that's the path with this one.
Yeah, quite possible. We'll see. Blacksmith, as you mentioned, the second place finisher actually looked pretty good running at him late. This is a horse who had run very well on debut, came back as a 2-5 favorite, and just botched the opening furlong or so of that race and never really did any running. Didn't get any pace in front of him that day, but seemed to improve a
Exactly.
great deal stretching out, which pedigree wise is not all that important. Do you think it would be foolish to maybe rate Blacksmith just a notch below Litmus Test at this point?
Well, they're two different horses at this point. I mean, if you're going off that race, you could really make a case there's not much between them given the contrast in terms of trips as individuals. Litmus Test, we see Bob Baffert runners show up early and that they're precocious and they win. We kind of often see their best. And then there's a blacksmith type horse that shows a good number first out, as you mentioned, and you can make some subtle excuses as far as the trip and lacking pace in their second start and then taking another move forward. This just might be a developing type horse that we haven't seen their best of yet. Where a litmus test, he's already proven he's fast. He's already proven that he can hold his own in graded stakes company. And it's just a contrast of those two horses where Blacksmith could have room to improve being lightly raced of those two.
Undoubtedly, we'll see both on the Derby Trail. We'll see if Blacksmith gets an opportunity to break his maiden before he moves back into graded stakes company. Still a maiden after 3 starts, but again, a winning effort in most editions of the Los Al Futurity, just simply second best to his stablemate Litmus Test in this 2025 edition. Well, we'll go from some 2-year-olds to 3-year-olds that are soon to be 4. There were a couple of stakes races at Gulfstream on Saturday afternoon. The Tropical Park Oaks and Derby, respectively, both took place at a mile and a 16th on the turf. And the Oaks was won by Destino Doro, a Brad Cox trainee who had shown some real ability throughout the year, was well backed at the windows on a number of occasions, including against stablemate Fionn back in the dueling grounds Oaks at Kentucky Downs. Much to this morning line maker's surprise, she ended up going off the favorite in that race, but Fionn was victorious in part as part of a huge campaign. Destino Doro got the job done here. Emily, I thought it was a pretty solid way for her to close out her 3-year-old campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. I thought this was a good effort, and we'll talk about this. I sort of saw this race as similar theme as we go into the later race, into the Tropical Park Derby, where it was a race where it looked like it was going to have that contentious pace and set up a horse from off the pace. And that was the kind of trip that Destino d'Oro got, as you can see them raiding inside, and they'll end up getting up from off the pace. But it's set up for that type of runner, and really that race shape coming together, where Ramsey Pond is also off the pace. They'll continue to run on. And then number 13, Brown Sugar as well from the outside. So it was a good effort. But then again, keeping in mind all these things, getting that right pace to chase, getting those live connections on their side. Because I'm always thinking when I'm watching trips and watching performances with horses, it's amazing with horse racing as many times, and even you could put the same horse in the race, you'll never see the same race twice. So just kind of understanding those nuances of this type of race shape that's set up for that off the pace run that she was able to deliver here as we're watching the replay.
Yeah, you see her angling out now. She's the 4 in this field, and now going to target the leader off the turn and one more time, who was actually the 9-5 favorite in this race, Javier Castellano, trying to hold them off. And Destino Doro, what's key in these Gulfstream races on that turf course with big fields is that you have to be able to accelerate. And she did exactly that when asked to do so. I thought going around the turn, which was really the telltale portion of this race, is when they got to about the 3/8 pole. Edgard Zayas squeezed her a little bit. She had immediately advanced around the outside, and you've got to get a free run, and she did exactly that in what was a pretty workmanlike effort all in all to get up at odds of 7-2. A filly who I wouldn't be shocked if we see potentially in a race like the Pegasus Filly and Mare Turf next month, obviously based in South Florida with Brad Cox's string. That's at Payson Park. That was the Tropical Park Oaks. You mentioned the Tropical Park Derby, which took place a little bit later on the same program, went as race number 11. And in that nightcap, it was Layabout who got the job done by a nose in a driving finish. We're going to take a look at that. Layabout was 10-1 on the morning line in what was a pretty contentious race on paper. The public absolutely hammered him down to 5-2. You'll see him at the beginning of this race. He is number 6. You know, Emily, he may have won by a scant margin. I thought this horse did a lot of dirty work, chasing outside the whole way. This race was run basically at dusk, which does make it a little bit hard to see it at some points in time. There was some rain about to fall as well. This is a horse that now 2 times in a row has had an uncovered 3 to 4 wide trip. I'm not exactly sure how good he is, but I wonder if his PPs might belie how good he is. He might be a little bit better than we think.
Yeah, and certainly coming out of the showing up stakes and finishing second, where they had to race against the flow, and the public catching up on that and saying they were probably best that day, and that was part of the reason they were bet down. But a very good effort in here. It was another race that looked like there was some pace signed on, and so it can really upgrade the effort of Layabout. It, as you mentioned, was uncovered throughout, so had that ground loss and was fairly sitting up close to that pace. I mean, the front runners, as you can see, cleared a little bit. The trip horse in there is probably the horse that's driving on their outside, in number 4, Church and State, who we saw check earlier when they showed the replay. But a very good effort for Layabout in here, who's just been in good form, and the public very sharp in there catching that one. A good race all around.
Couple of really tough beats for jockey Javier Castellano, who's on the 3, Tiz Dashing, and here he loses by a nose again after losing the Tropical Park Oaks a little earlier. Tiz Dashing, he gave this horse an incredibly good ride. You could see around the turn, he's in the blinkers now in the Saratoga Silks angling out, looking for a little bit of room. He saved all kinds of ground, got him out just in time, but Layabout had gotten the jump. And, you know, we mentioned the pace in this race, and it looked on paper as if there really was an abundance of speed, but Tank, who's a horse that had shown some real ability earlier in 2025, he fought all the way and ended up losing this race basically by a half a length in a pretty strong performance of his own. So game win by Layabout. Connections mentioned the Pegasus Turf, also mentioned some potential races in the Middle East, which I would think would probably be a little bit beyond his capabilities at this point, but why not dream when it's only December and a whole season awaits you, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, with those big purses, it's kind of like for us with horse players when those big tournaments come up. They don't come up so often. So if you're in a position to go for it, you consider going for it.
You want to dance every dance for sure. Well, let's go for Wand at this point, since we're going to go for it. We're going to talk about the Go for Wand
Love
and
it.
the winner of that race, Weigh the Risks, who was really, really impressive in victory. I thought this was Saturday afternoon at Aqueduct. This is a filly that actually began her career on the turf and looked like potentially a graded stakes type horse on the turf. And when she kind of didn't advance early as a 3-year-old filly, trainer Chad Brown put her on the dirt. In this Go for Wand, Emily, she looked like the lone speed on paper, and I like the ride that Manny Franco gave her. He didn't waste any time in getting her to a comfortable position on the front end. She obviously benefited from getting that lead, but she really left no doubt as to who was best in here, pulling clear to win very comfortably in the end.
Yeah, and what we're seeing right now in that opening quarter, that might just have been the winning type strategy because they did have to rush up. They look like lone speed, but you're almost able to get 24 on the inside at Aqueduct, and your field kind of bunching up and having to put themselves in position, and now trying to get that separation. And as they were able to get that separation on the field, you start to see everybody kind of getting scrubbed on there, trying to keep up and weigh the risks staying on late. It was a good effort, and Aqueduct's not a circuit that I follow, so luckily we have good trip takers at Optics that I can follow along. But another thing that I like to do is just kind of get familiar is also what are the contexts of this. And since we pulled up one of the other races on the card and trainer Chad Brown just having an absolute lights out Aqueduct right now. So when I'm looking at these type of efforts, I do consider that like the hot trend, right? If you're running a lot of horses this month to date. Let me pull up just at Aqueduct here, having multiple wins in a very small sample, 50% winners, almost 80% in the money, and getting top efforts out of horses. That just might be something to consider going forward, but clearly on the day, weigh the risks and a very smart ride under Manny Franco, as you mentioned.
Yeah, 30 minutes later, same connection score with Collect the Data, a filly who has now won 4 of her last 5 starts. And a little bit earlier on the card, I'm going to throw our producer Lance a bit of a curveball and stay at Aqueduct, but a little bit earlier on the card on Saturday afternoon in race 3, Chad Brown debuted a colt named Iron Honor, who was 5-1. Really didn't get all that much money, all things considered, but looked really impressive in wearing down the early leader Crossing the Channel. Crossing the Channel was a second-time starter coming up from Laurel who had run well on debut, and the public really went hard for Crossing the Channel. He had run second to a horse named Hometown Bound first time out, was bet down to a 9-5 favoritism in here. And you'll see Iron Honor, who's the 2 in this spot, advance up on the outside to stalk the pace. Crossing the Channel steps on the gas a little around the turn, and it looks as if he's uncatchable. I thought Iron Honor really ran well, Emily, to stay on and wear this horse down, showing the kind of determination and grit that you'd like to see from a veteran racehorse, let alone a debuting runner. I thought this was a really promising debut.
I thought so too, as well. Again, that would my only consideration. The one thing that I would just put into context is the fact the barn is sending out live runners. They all tend to be running top efforts, something to go and monitor going forward. Because as we get the speed figure back for this, as you mentioned, I don't know if you mentioned the speed figure yet, but in terms of that number, when you have lightly raced horses, you're always wondering, is this horse going to improve, regress, or stay the same? And clearly, after clearing the maiden condition with a horse of some quality, they're going to step up, whether they go through their conditions and go to allowance or just take a swing in stakes company at this point. That's what you would want to really be assessing is with this type of effort and that number, is it something that they're going to be able to repeat and improve on as that competition gets tougher?
Yeah, $475,000 yearling purchase. Dam was a minor, 2-time winner, first foal to race, second family solid, but a horse I think that probably outperformed expectations. That's a great point you make in terms of understanding that the barn had 3 wins on Saturday and is winning at a pretty striking clip at this point. We'll obviously be looking to see where Chad lands next with Iron Honor, maybe a horse that's going to stay in New York for the winter, and they would perhaps target an early February race like the Withers, or might he get on the travel squad and head down to South Florida? Either way, a 99 Brisnet speed rating, which matches what Paladin from the Chad Brown barn earned a week before in the Remsen. So obviously a cup as far as Chad's Derby prospects goes that's filling up seemingly by the day. Let's stay on the topic of flashy debut performances and talk a little bit about a runner named Decode Decode, as Matt Dinnerman called him, who won on Sunday afternoon at Oaklawn. Obviously, you're familiar with that circuit, providing expert picks here at TwinSpires for Oaklawn. This is a first-time starter by Speightstown, Emily, that went for $775,000 at auction, and boy, he looked the part.
He did, and even going into the race and watching their works, a horse that looked extremely race ready, and especially when you just kind of put that in context with some of the other runners in the field, whether it was the horses that had experience or some of the first time starters that I was able to get a look at their works going in. You can see Decode on the outside, stalking up close to the pace in there before it ended up drawing. We'll see them draw clear and separate from the field, but very professional effort, great ride. They obviously had an extremely live horse in here on debut. I also question if this was the context of also just kind of catching the right field and the right time and place. Again, handicapping this race going in and looking at the horses that had run, even the second choice, who's currently the 5-horse 5-2, number 5 coming soon, and then number 1 Tis Authority. Watching their races, I always thought there was some class weakness, and they showed similar to me in that type of race as far as being at the maiden special weight level. And then the only other horse that you kind of expected going in that might be a threat was the number 8 horse MacTac for Steve Asmussen, who was the second choice on the morning line at 3-1, and just a complete lobster on the board. I'm sorry, to kind of using some insider terms there, but was completely cold on the board, took absolutely no money in there. And that's been a sign just from opening week, watching some of the Steve Asmussen runners and just in years past. That's a sign that maybe not quite the day. And that horse had a trip. So again, when you're just kind of looking at the context of the field, Decode, extremely impressive, but also victim of, or I should say benefit of the circumstance of that type of race and the way that it shook out as well. And again, that context mattering.
Yeah, for people who are unfamiliar with the trainer too, Ray Ashford Jr., mainly a claiming trainer over the years. In recent years, he's gotten horses from Tom Duran, who owns this horse, who actually owned the dam as well. He didn't breed this horse, but he owned the dam. She was a really flashy sprint type that her career ended when she tried the Thoroughbred Club of America back in 2020, finished 4th in there, and we never saw her again. This is clearly her best foal to race up to this point. They paid, again, just shy of $800,000. This is a horse that actually was purchased at Timonium but did not train. He was bought during the portion of it after they had stopped doing some of the timed workouts that came in the aftermath of the Preakness with some of those weather issues. But it'll be really interesting to see how quickly they stretch Decode out. Obviously, he's a Speightstown, so there's going to be questions of being out of a sprinty mare about how far he wants to go. But if they have to settle on going shorter, Emily, I feel like we know he's going to get there quickly at the very least, as he is plenty fleet of foot. Well, staying on the topic of Oaklawn, the opening day feature was a race called the Advent that was won by Peter Miller with Ramon Vasquez on board. Ramon Vasquez had multiple wins on the opening, I believe 4 wins on the opening day card, which included this Advent that was won in wire-to-wire fashion.
Yes, and also Peter Miller sending out live runners as well, had 2 wins on the day, and Dirty Rich ran to it. I mean, Ramon Vasquez, we'll watch the replay right now, just had to rush up a little bit. Horses getting out of the gate, it's hard to see on that pan because it looks like he pops out, but I ended up going back and watching the head on. They kind of rush out there for the lead and then end up getting some pace pressure, but again, holding in there, seemed very well meant, coming in off that 69-day layoff. And another thing why of the stakes races, why I wanted to look at this one is not just for the winner, but these being 2-year-olds starting out opening week. And really, if anything, is this 5.5 furlong sprint distance, especially with these horses. Dirty Rich clearly is kind of the type of horse that's going to excel at 5.5. But I think if you're looking at this race going forward, there's probably some other horses in here that a little bit more ground, whether it's 6, whether it's 7, whether it ends up being that 2-turn mile or even a 1-turn mile. Those are things to consider. And again, it's another hot trend to pay attention to, finding that right time and right timing all around in terms of the trip and for those hot connections.
Yeah, and I think one of the ones you're alluding to with that is Boca Beach Club, who we see finishing second here. A little bit on the slider side in terms of physicality, but a horse that pedigree-wise you would think will stretch out well by Omaha Beach out of a mineshaft mare. They did not pay much money for this horse at all, and I think he's already surprised them in a couple of starts, which included a blowout win on debut at Hawthorne, into the teeth of a pretty slow pace that day. I thought speed figure-wise, he had a good look going into the Advent. They pummeled him. He went off 13-10, ran a good race, I think, all things considered, but it feels to me like he might be the one that you'd want to favor stretching out.
I would give him a look. I thought the another horse on the outside with number 7, Strong Potential, who their ride was a little bit questionable, one of many for Joe Rosario, in my opinion, on that day. But another one for Steve Asmussen that I watched them train going in. I liked the works, and then on race day, it wasn't that crazy about the visuals, but they ended up taking hold early, which you're drawn outside in a 5.5 furlong sprint race. I don't know how much time you think you're going to have, but taking back wide from off the pace, and then ended up kind of putting in that sneaky closing run. So one we might not have seen the best of yet. As you mentioned, Boca Beach Club, Spun DMC kind of had to rush up into that early pace and try to make a race of it, at least put some pace pressure on Dirty Rich. But even the horse down inside that finished 5th, Ganas, if I'm saying that correctly, the 5 horse, I just don't think that they handled Oaklawn Park at all. So I wouldn't be surprised if they try to find a different circuit, and then maybe we didn't see the best from them, because prior to that, they ran okay in the street sense and were coming off 2 straight wins at that point. So kind of a sneaky race where I think some horses just taking some slightly different paths could see improvement.
Definitely, we will certainly keep an eye on all of them as the distances stretch out a little bit, including the winner, Dirty Rich, the runner-up, Boca Beach Club, and a couple of the others, including Strong Potential and Ganas, that were mentioned by Emily. Well, one more for us to look at in terms of 2-year-olds. This was Jackson Hole, who was a winner on Saturday afternoon at Gulfstream Park, a horse that was purchased for $1.3 million at auction, and there were obviously high expectations going into that event. It was the 4th race on Saturday afternoon. He was sent off as the 4-5 favorite. And, there was a little bit of chatter afterwards, Emily, about this race. One of the things that I think can really bamboozle people is when a flashy, high-priced 2-year-old runs what some believe to be a good workmanlike race, and then you find out that it may have been good and workmanlike, but it was really slow.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. And I'm not one that really pays a lot of attention to purchase price, etc. Because there's a banana that's been duct taped on a wall that was apparently worth millions of dollars. So horses are art, and art is subjective. So whether somebody thinks what a horse is worth, especially when they're young little babies, but in terms of Jackson Hole, I think you make good points, and really probably one of the things in my game that I can improve on is looking at those things as far as time that you're really excellent at. Because in terms of watching this race from my eye, I was going to come in and I saw your opinion. So before I watched the race, so I was like, okay, I'm going to, I'm probably going to agree with Nick on this, and we're just going to, be completely against this horse. But watching the race, I didn't think it was that bad, all things considered. I don't necessarily know I'm going to make like a hype train out of it, but watching them train going in, they showed a little bit more early speed. So the fact that they had to rate in here and first out, especially from the outside, a little bit of adversity before taking over. There wasn't that many dirt races at Gulfstream Park, so it's hard to say, but it did kind of seem that you wanted to be forward. Maybe a horse that has a little bit more upside to them and could present and move forward. I thought this effort was good, but I'm like the in between, right? I'm not one that's like raving about this effort or completely think it's bad. I want to see more from this horse, and I think if he can take another step forward, there can definitely be something there. And again, I'm not big on what they ended up paying for him. It's just more of that kind of developing type. And we've known Todd Pletcher in the past, who's had a ton of string of juveniles and first-time starters, especially at Gulfstream Park over the years. But numbers as of late, there hasn't been that much in terms of volume. And one of those, what's the filly that he has right now that just won the stakes race, Zany? And then this one is kind of being the rise to the top of that smaller sample. So I'm interested in to see what this horse can do going forward.
Yeah, we'll see if maybe he ends up traveling, obviously, with Todd having Ted Noffey in South Florida, pointing towards either the Holy Bull or the Fountain of Youth. You know, one of the things about this race, and obviously this horse has every right to improve. He was a first-time starter. He was hard ridden for about 5 furlongs, which, you know, you obviously don't necessarily want that, but it will be good from an education perspective. And I think the biggest thing will be whether he has more speed. And if he has more speed, it will obviously be advantageous because having speed in dirt racing is just about a necessity. So we can certainly hope that this maybe ironed out some of the kinks they had going in. And he had trained very well. I think all the reports had a series of B plus workouts, depending on who was giving the rating. But obviously a horse that had kind of touted himself a bit in the mornings. We will definitely await the next spot for Jackson Hole as he advances forward off of that debut. Well, that's it for the racing portion of this, but it is hardly it for our conversation. Emily, you have something pretty exciting coming up right here at TwinSpires over the weekend, a little tournament spaces action on the docket.
Yes. I love tournaments. Probably the first time that you ever saw me ever was probably at a ballroom in Las Vegas. So that's where I started. It's what I still love. I love the tournament space. I love the tournament games. The opportunities at TwinSpires are great. And obviously, they're not just paying me to say it. I really think so. And I was covering it over the weekend, especially some of those cash games. I did some of the Oaklawn games that was $75 buy-in and then 25% or $100 buy-in, 75 goes to bankroll, then $25 going into the prize pool. You get a lot of good players and it updates very quick. You could see how people play. And there's so much education within that, right? Just in terms of how to structure your bets, how to play tournaments. And so being able to cover that, provide that education, and then just that excitement of playing, right? So when I covered on Friday, I had Nick Sievers, who's a great tournament player. He's probably going, oh, I'm an okay tournament player, but I think he plays great and he's only getting better. And then on Saturday, early on in the Oaklawn Park game, the first race of the day, Clay Sanders jumped up to a big $300 lead and he was on the space. And so, having him on just right there and being able to talk about the play, and he was down at Oaklawn and sharing the experience there it's a lot of fun. The space is what's great about it. I mean, one, you don't have that visual component of watching the race, but since most of us, whether fortunately or unfortunately, depending on how you look at it, we're on X as it is. So it's so easy to just kind of open the space and meet people where they're at, follow these tournaments. And then since I'm doing Oaklawn, being able to handicap it as well in real time, which, as you know, giving out the picks, there's so many times that because you don't have all the information, you don't have the look of the horse, you don't have those hot trends of, oh, Ramon Vasquez is on fire, we better upgrade that horse, or I want to give that horse another look, or the way the track profile is playing, or the way that the odds are going to shift and things like that. And that added information in real time is how you become a successful horse player. And we often forget that, especially when we're giving out picks days in advance. So the TLDR is being live, covering the tournaments, covering the circuit, just really can get down and playing horses, meeting people where they're at. And it's an open space that people can come on and listen if they want to chat, kind of jump on and ask questions in the chat. It's really great. It's a lot of fun. I'm enjoying it. I don't know if my passion is coming through, but I am enjoying it.
Loud and clear, as it should, right? It's exciting. These are things that we
Yeah.
enjoy. So, and you mentioned, I think, something that's fundamental about the TwinSpires tournament offering. And again, I mean, I'm going to be accused of being a shill for something, so I might as well be for somebody that's paying me. But, in all seriousness, the great thing about them is that you mentioned the different price points. So if you're somebody that you and I obviously prefer a live money tournament setup, you might not be capitalized to play a $1,500 event like you'll see periodically, a KDBC qualifier. Maybe you want to hone your skills a little bit. You get in some of these cash games. You mentioned a 75. There's some $100 entries. There's less than that as well. You sort of figure out where's your niche, right? Where's your comfort zone? Because ultimately, if you're playing at a price point where you're not comfortable betting all of the money that you have, you need to move down a price point. Right? Because
That's exactly
in
right.
order to win a
100%.
live money
Yep.
tournament, you have to be willing to bet all the money that you have. And the good thing is that the offering there gives you so many options, which I think is invaluable to somebody just getting started.
Yeah, yes. And as you mentioned, in terms of that price point, as I forgot to mention, that on Sunday we will cover the TwinSpires, which was the initial synthetic championship tournament. It'll still offer the NHC seats, which it is kind of a rare opportunity, as Jared pointed out, to have that, or Matt Miller maybe have pointed it out, to have that live money as well as offering seats, a combination that's not always there. So having that, and as you mentioned, if like using Clay as an example, getting in a position where he did have to bet it all, and then also covering those tournaments, is because you end at zero, that doesn't necessarily mean you played bad or that you made mistakes. That can be a winning type play that doesn't work out. Your horse stumbles out of the gate. There was a lot of people in that Friday when the 3 horse stumbled right out of the gate. That was their entire bankroll. Was that the wrong play? Probably not. They like the horse. It's just like horse racing's got a horse race. Having that objective opinion so that people understand, especially when they're getting started out, it's not necessarily wrong. It didn't work out. Just keep doing the right thing, and variance will work in your favor. So having those opportunities is great. It's a great platform.
Without a doubt, head on over to the TwinSpires tournament section at twinspires.com and get involved for sure. You can try and beat Matt Miller. He's going to give you plenty of opportunities to do so. You can remind him of it on X, and then he'll spend the rest of his life getting even with you, because I know Matt well, and that's exactly how he goes about things. You're not going to beat him too often, though. Matt's done an outstanding job, along with a few others, Ryan Petruniak as well, at the TwinSpires tournaments thus far. Well, we will look forward to that Spaces on Saturday afternoon for sure, Emily, and we'll be looking for your expert picks available on a daily basis at twinspires.com. Mine as well, including some app videos on both Gulfstream, well, just Gulfstream this weekend as we await Horse Player Christmas on Boxing Day at Santa Anita. Well, this has been a blast. I'm sure we went on too far, and you and I probably have a lot more left in the tank, but we're going to leave it at that. So big thanks, Emily, and good luck this week.
Thank you, and always good to chat.
Always, for sure. Well, thank you to all of you. Rate, like, subscribe. Make sure you're doing everything you can and get involved at TwinSpires as we march forward towards 2026 and the Kentucky Derby. Until next time, for Emily Gullikson, Nick Tammaro here. Best of luck.